Clementine. Clementine is what is wrong with Season 3 of The Walking Dead game. Hear me out. How's everybody doing? Welcome back to Lost in Games. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk. This is Lost in Games Unscripted, the series that's very quickly becoming about picking apart The Walking Dead episodes, or seasons, I suppose. We'll get past that and we'll be doing other things, but right now I'm having a lot of fun picking these apart and finding new ways to make the camera and the things on the videos interesting, because you know the normal videos I just put the game clips in and it's not quite as fun. So but you like my Mothman cup? If you do, you should like the video and subscribe. I know it's early, I don't normally do that, but you know, let's go ahead and get into it. So season 1 of The Walking Dead game is all about Lee and his desire and drive to find a safe place in a world that's turned upside down. And in amongst that, he is tasked with protecting Clementine, who happens to be this little girl that he finds in a treehouse, and trying to help her find her parents and figure out, you know, how to keep her safe through all of the craziness that's happening with the zombies and, you know, the dead rising and all that kind of stuff. Season 2 is all about Clementine from her perspective and surviving in the world and finding a new place, you know, finding a place to call home. She has realized that her parents are no longer alive. Lee has died. She's got with Kristen and Omid to start the season off, but then, you know, Omid dies and Krista goes missing and probably is dead. And then Clementine goes through her little thing in season 2. And season 3, if we're being honest, should have been one of two things. It either should have been a straight-up continuation of Clementine's story or something completely new. See, at the end of Season 2, there is a couple of different ways that you could end it. So, for one, Clementine could be at Wellington, which is the ending that I got, which is I want to say it's the canon ending. It's the best ending in my opinion. You could also be with Kenny if you got to Wellington with Kenny and decided to leave the place and just stay with him. Or you could be with Jane if you chose to kill Kenny and run away with Jane. In which case you wound up at the House Hardware. And Jane, we'll save that for later. Or you could be by yourself, which is basically I think she's like 11 or 12, something like that in Season 2. Not even that old, really. She's got to be more like 10 or 11, but she has a baby with her. And we're going to talk about AJ too, because I think he is also part of the problem with Season 3 and Season 4 when we get there. But let's start with Season 3, because Season 3 picks up basically back at the beginning of the entire outbreak. We are finding out what happened and kind of getting a glimpse of the beginning of things going downhill from the perspective of Javier, who's a former baseball player who he'd been rushing home to try and get there before his dad died. And didn't make it, but then his dad came back to life, the beginning of the apocalypse, bit his mom. His brother runs off and takes her to try and go get help, and then just shit hits the fan, and we fast forward to 4 years, I believe it's 4 years down the road. And it's a fun little startup thing. It's kind of interesting. It's new. I happen to really like Season 3. I like the story in Season 3. I like the characters. I think it was, overall, it had the potential to be one of the best seasons of the game. Save Season 1. Season 1 was the probably always going to be considered the best, just because Season 1 was the first. It was the first exposure to the whole thing, and it was something new and fresh, and zombies were big, and so it was kind of expected, right? Season 3, though, because you're introducing these new characters, it had the potential to kind of revamp the series and bring it back and make it something awesome, because especially if you ended up at Wellington, you could have basically had an end to Clementine's story. And I think that they should have done one of two things. They should have either ended Clementine's story at the end of Season 2, and then we could have found out what happened to her later, maybe through some kind of dialogue, or maybe we could have run into her at the end of Season 3, you know, meeting her for the first time, and having her be like, oh yeah, I used to run with this guy, and then I wound up at this place, and any number of things, right? But Telltale, especially in the later seasons, the later years, as the company started to go under and have its own problems, they kind of ran into this thing where they would shoot themselves in the foot and try to have everything. We'll get there with season 4 when we talk more about season 4, but they did this in season 4 with the ending, with how they pretended to kill off Clementine. And with season 3, they wanted to have a continuation of Clementine's story and making that more deep and having more of an interaction with her while still making it about somebody new. Now, it didn't work very well in season 2, except for the fact that we played as Clementine. So at least there was that. So we got to choose how she reacted and who she interacted with and all that kind of stuff. And the new characters, they weren't that great, let's be honest. Season 3, the new characters were pretty damn good, actually. In my humble opinion, I liked them all for their own little quirks and their own little things. Even David, for all of his problems, was a much deeper character than people give him credit for. I'll be doing a friend or foe episode on him at some point in the future. It just depends on how busy my schedule gets in the next few weeks. But I think David was a really deep character. Javier was a deep character. Kate even had her level of depth that was interesting. And I loved that they introduced this idea of new settlements and being so far into the apocalypse and how everything had kind of broken down and kind of been rebuilt in a way. And we had some functioning cities that were actually working. Smaller towns, smaller communities, but still some working communities. And like Preston was a perfect example. It was a very cool little community where people could come and go. It kind of reminded me of maybe like an old trading post or something like that, where you could just stop for a couple of days, get some rest, maybe restock, meet some new people, trade items, whatever, and then move on your way, with a few people kind of staying there to keep it going, right? And I loved all of that stuff. And then you throw the story of Clementine in. And it's not just the story of Clementine, it's the story of Clementine losing AJ and or losing Kenny or Jane, and then regaining a possibility at AJ. And it just threw me off. I did not like that at all. While I enjoyed Clementine's story overall and getting to see more of her, because Clementine, let's face it, she was the main character of season 2. She was kind of a main character of season 1. She was kind of the one that Lee was protecting and everything. So if they wanted to go in the direction of, okay, we're going to keep Clementine learning her story and seeing her backstory and what happens with her, maybe instead of giving us flashbacks as to what happened with her and the New Frontier, maybe let us play that story instead. I think it would have been a lot more interesting if we would have started off with however we ended season 2. So either in Wellington with Kenny, with Jane, or on our own, and going through maybe the first episode kind of either going through the fall of Wellington, which I don't really like the fall of Wellington, let's be honest. I honestly think instead of a fall, she should have just left Wellington. You could have even had an excuse of like she wants to go find Krista. She's feeling up to it. She's feeling more adventurous. She wants to go out and see the world. Maybe she's been at Wellington for a year or something like that, and she decides I'm going to go and look for Krista, or something along those lines. Or even I'm going to go see if I can find Kenny. They've got some openings. We've expanded the community. I want to see if I can find Kenny. Something along those lines that would have been better than just, well, guess what? Wellington's falling now. So there's that. They could have had shown her with Kenny. Maybe not have him die in a car accident. Maybe have him die saving her when she makes a mistake or something along those lines. With Jane, I really don't like the ending with Jane at all. I don't think that it was right with the... I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Jane at all, but realistically, They should have done something different with her. Have her leave, have her feel like she's getting too close to Clementine and just leave or something like that. They did her dirty. I'm just going to say I don't like the way that they ended her story. Or if you're by yourself, maybe you just wander into the new frontier. However you want to do it. At the end of episode 1, Clementine is with the new frontier. And so you can have episodes 2 and 3 with her getting to know some of the characters, getting to know David. That would have made it real interesting and really digging into the story, right? And then at the end of episode 3, or maybe even into episode 4, well, then you could have had her getting kicked out. And if you really have to have AJ, having the separation with AJ, and then having her run into Javier, I think that would have been much more interesting. And then we would have been Clementine playing as her and deciding what to do with Javier, how to act with him, and then let that story play out as we get to know those characters a little bit, kind of similar to how they did with season 2 with the cabin group, except with a little bit better characters. And then episode 5 could have just been getting back into the new frontier, something along those lines. And maybe you could have even had it continue into another season. I don't necessarily think that would have been necessary, though, because you could have cut out a lot of the backstory, a lot of the stuff that Javier does, you really wouldn't have had to do. They could have had the entirety of, I think it's the third, I want to say it's the third and fourth episodes of season 3 currently. You could have had those entirely take place off screen, and you as Clementine come back in with Javier and then go take down the New Frontier leadership. I think that would have been so much better. And you might try to argue that, well, I mean, if especially when I talk about getting rid of AJ, what reason would she have had to go back to the New Frontier without AJ? Well, she didn't have a reason in the first place because she thought AJ was dead. And we could have explored that a little bit more too, having AJ slowly getting sicker over the course of a couple of episodes and then deciding how desperate we are to steal the medication. There could have been so many other awesome things. And then you're exploring Clementine's story and you're sticking close to the person that is supposed to be the person that we are following the story of, right? Now, without that, you could have just had Javier's story as maybe its own separate thing, maybe a DLC. Like, that might have been kind of cool. Something separate, that would have been its own little thing to tell a story and get to know Javier, because Javier and Kate and Gabe and I don't know why I can't think of her name. I'll put her name on the screen. But the daughter, they were all great characters in their own right. They all felt kind of real. They all felt unique for the first time since season 1, because let's face it, the characters in season 2 weren't exactly great. So you could have had this whole thing on its own, sans Clementine. Take Clementine completely out of the picture, have her do her own thing. And I think it would have flowed a lot better into season 4. I think it would have made season 3 more interesting. I think it would have been better received by the fans, because season 3, from what I have seen, from what you guys have commented in other places that I've looked, season 3 is the second most hated season, close behind season 2. For the most part, I think usually, and I know for me, it goes season 1 is my favorite, season 4 is the second. And then seasons 2 and 3 are kind of interchangeable, although I like season 3 just a little bit better. And I think if you were to continue Clementine's story, and that way you don't have this gap, right? Because it feels weird. Season 2, writing aside, kind of makes sense because you're picking up from Clementine's standpoint, right? Lee has died, now you're Clementine. At the end of season 2, Clementine's still alive. No matter which ending you take, Clementine is there. And then season 3 we're just thrown into this new story. If season 3 had been more like a 400 Days style DLC, cut a lot of the fat out, have it be a lot shorter, and simply get to the point where Javier first runs into Clementine, and then season 3 could have been picking up Clementine's story getting her to the point where she meets Javier and then goes in and takes down the New Frontier and all that kind of stuff. That could have been so much better. And you even could have had maybe a second DLC in there somewhere where you could have shown from the other side of things. Maybe even from David's perspective in the New Frontier. Like, imagine that. The perspective of Javier in a DLC and getting up to the point where he meets Clementine, and then a DLC from the perspective of David until he gets up to meeting Clementine. So you have these two DLCs, both of these converge, and then you have Clementine come in for Season 3, and you play as Clementine for the actual Season 3. I think that would have been so much better than what we got, and it would have led into Season 4 a lot better. And Season 4 will be the next one that we talk about, because I have some thoughts about Season 4. Like I said, it was my second favorite overall, but it's not like it's second by a long shot. You know, it's second for some of the improvements, some of the better things I think they did with Season 4, but we'll get into that in the next video. But I want to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Season 3? What did you think of my ideas for Season 3? I'm always interested to hear what you guys think. I know nothing will probably ever come of this. Telltale's probably never going to make another season of The Walking Dead, but who knows? Maybe they will, and things like this might be a good inspiration for them for a direction that they could go in for some really interesting stuff. But that's really all I got for this episode of Unscripted. I'm surprised I made it through this whole thing, and I didn't even sip my tea more than once. Amazing, right? That doesn't count. But I want to thank you all for watching. You can join the Patreon. I've got the Patreon and the channel memberships, and those things, I don't mention this enough, but they help to do things like buy hard drives and games and that kind of stuff, because believe it or not, these games, I've been recording. I've got The Wolf Among Us complete now, The Walking Dead, with a bunch of extra stuff for The Walking Dead 2 that I've had to do over time. And then I'm doing Red Dead Redemption and Detroit. And all of that takes up a lot of space, so I need hard drives, I need that kind of stuff. And when you join as a channel member or a patron, you actually help me with that kind of stuff on the channel to help make the channel better and help me have a bigger variety of games that I can record and go through and break down in the Philosophy and Ethics series and other videos. And I'm also going to be starting a breakdown like I did with episode 1, where I sat down and I watched through the whole episode and then, broke it down and then put it. But I'm going to be doing it in weekly releases as opposed to one big drop, just to make it a little easier to digest for people. So keep an eye out for that coming soon. But that's all I got for now. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.